should be on moot. A reminder that all comments by members should be addressed through the chair. Now, before we resume debate, I just wanted to apprise all members, given our interest in developments in Ukraine, that we have received notification that 2 members from the Ukrainian Parliament will be visiting Ottawa, and they have indicated, should the members agree, they would like to appear before this committee. And that would be for June 13th, which would be next Monday, and it would be starting at 10 a.m., and then it would go till 12. The 2 members that have written us are Ms. Yevgenia Kravchuk and Mr. Rustem Omarov. So members can decide at some point whether they think that would be a good idea to once again hear from Ukrainian parliamentarians. Now we will be... Yes.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Would we be deciding that now, or are you moving a vote, or how would you like the committee to make that decision?
Should we do it now? If there is unanimous consent, we can vote on that. No, there's unanimous consent. Yeah. Everyone agrees?
Yeah. We certainly agree. Yes.
Okay, great. Good to hear. So we will take note of that. Thank you, Ms. Ben-Dayan. Now, if we can resume debate, and Ms. Ben-Dayan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you clarify what we are resuming debate on?
We are resuming debate on Mr. Jennis's amendment to the motion. Yes.
I believe that we agreed on an amendment that we had been debating for some time. So now are we moving to a new amendment from Mr. Jennis?
Sorry? Yes. Let's ask the clerk to read the amendment. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment was that the words, "and that this study not take place until after the completion of the committee's studies on Ukraine, vaccine equity, and Taiwan, as well as studies on legislation sent from the House of Commons, and further, that it not take place until the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure submits a report prescribing the manner in which the study is to proceed," be inserted between the words "rights globally" and the words "and that the committee report its findings to the House."
Thank you. Much appreciated, Madam Clerk. I would like, I guess, to begin by saying that in good faith, we agreed to the previous amendment proposed by the same member, and at this point it would seem that there is just going to be a litany of new amendments at every turn. I believe calculations have been made, and it is now the 16th hour of debate on this same motion. We have all agreed on many occasions that the important work of this study is being deferred, and I would urge all members to move simply to vote on this motion, which has dragged on in debate far too long, and would not be supportive of this amendment. As I had mentioned on a previous occasion, I believe at the end of the last meeting, not only would there only be further amendments should we agree to this amendment, that is obviously quite clear at this point, but that moving an amendment which would essentially defer the matter to after a report from the subcommittee gets presented to this committee will only engender another endless filibuster on behalf of the Conservatives, and so I am not supportive of this particular further amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Ben-Dayan. Mr. Jennis, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to hear. I'm sorry to hear that we're not yet at a point where we're at a consensus. I had hoped that we might be there, and I think just to review the context and maybe clarify a few points from what Ms. Ben-Diane had said. We were very clear prior to the vote on the previous amendment that we would be proposing one more amendment. I said as much, and I said as much on the record, and the record will show that. So the implication that, well, we accepted the amendment in good faith and now here's another amendment. No, I said prior to the amendment, I want you guys to be aware that there will be another amendment coming. And the amendment that we are putting forward to this motion is, it's actually completely consistent with just things that government members have said throughout the course of this conversation on this motion, that we had a motion put before the committee in the middle of existing studies, 3 existing studies, and at the time I said the expectation that we would see 2 additional pieces of legislation, that we would see 2 pieces of legislation come to the committee in addition to the 3 studies we were already doing. So effectively there being 5 things on the table, which is a very substantial agenda, probably more substantial than most committees deal with in terms of 3 ongoing studies plus 2 points of business that the House has directed the committee to take up. And so what we said is, there are some problems with the motion as it's written, and I think Mr. Chong identified those problems when this issue was first up for discussion. But fundamentally, then we said let's make sure that the study that is proposed by this motion, if the motion passes, that it proceeds in a way that is prescribed by the special committee, and that it not proceed until the other work of the committee is finished. So that's all the amendment says. The amendment says we should focus first on completing the work that we have to do on the issue of Ukraine, vaccine equity in Taiwan, as well as legislation, and that their subcommittee should meet and prescribe the particulars of how the committee is going to undertake that study going forward. And in fact, members of the government have said precisely that this is their intention. Oh, no, we're not saying that the study should take place right now. Of course, we think that the committee's work on Ukraine should be completed first. But we just want to pass this motion anyways to express some aspiration about something that we would study in the future. Well, we are putting what they have said is their intention with respect to the committee's agenda. We are putting it into the text of the motion, and it's always a little bit suspicious when the government says this is what we're going to do, but then we put it into the text of the motion to say, okay, we're going to have this language in the motion to make sure this is what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden at that point, we have government members saying, oh, this is somehow unreasonable. And I think the process around the conversation we're having on this amendment is important to clarify that Conservatives have repeatedly moved motions to adjourn debate on this or to proceed to other orders of business. Our view is that the committee should get back to its work as soon as possible, get back to the important work it was doing prior to this disruptive motion being put forward, that we should get back to that work right away. And the best way to do that is to adjourn debate on this motion so that we can proceed with that work. And there's plenty of time for further discussion on how this type of a study would unfold. I think it's fairly obvious that even in the most sort of hawkish scenario, that we're not going to get to the content envisioned by this study, let's say prior to the summer. So there's just a pretty substantial amount of time that members could spend talking and figuring out kind of what and if and the particulars of this study. And that's why we've said let's adjourn debate on this matter. Let's adjourn debate and be able to proceed with the work of the committee as planned. The government has consistently voted against our proposals to adjourn debate, and they've said no. The only way they're going to allow this committee to proceed to something else is if we actually complete debate on this matter. So they're professing the same concern. We're saying let's get back to the regular work of this committee, and they're saying let's get back to the work of of this committee. So on face of it, you have two sides that are professing a desire for the same thing, which is the committee being able to proceed with its work. I guess the difference is that we've said the way for the committee to be able to proceed with its work is for the committee to adjourn debate on this matter and to be able to return to this matter closer to a time when we might actually proceed with a hypothetical study, closer to a time when we've actually completed the 5 points of business that are already on the table for the committee to do. And the government has said no. The government working with the NDP have said no, they're not going to accept those kinds of adjournment proposals that we've put forward. So then we are left with saying, well, if the government insists that we have to hash this out now, then we have to hash it out, which means making the arguments for and putting the amendments with respect to this motion that we think are appropriate. So, we are only in this situation because the government is unwilling to adjourn debate or accept motions that we put forward for the committee to proceed to other orders of business. So that's unfortunate because usually that's the way things are worked out. Again, we put this amendment forward. We were transparent about the fact that we were going to move one more amendment. We put forward this amendment on Thursday at Thursday's meeting, and Mr. Zubari at the time quite rightly said, "Can we have some conversations offline? Can we give each other feedback on what we want to do so that we don't have to do all the wordsmithing and the hashing out on the floor here?" And I sent the amendment. I moved it verbally. I sent the text of it to our esteemed clerk, who ensured it was translated and distributed it to the committee. My understanding is that members had it Thursday night, if not Thursday night, certainly Friday morning. They were able to see the amendment. They were able to look at it and consider it, and I would have welcomed feedback, suggestions from members in terms of refinements or at least expressions of support or not going forward. And we didn't receive those, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, and so now I'm finding out, and I'm not entirely surprised. Usually, when you don't hear from the other side, you can kind of get an indication. Okay, they're not going to go with you on that. But we had this amendment that I would have thought, could we have hashed it out? Could we have tried to figure something out on it? And that didn't happen. And now we're just being told, well, okay, actually, we're digging our heels in. And I'm going to assume that there's a reluctance to proceed in the way that we've thought made sense, which is to adjourn debate. But it's unfortunate because what we're saying on this amendment is just quite specifically to emphasize the importance of the committee's work on Ukraine, on vaccine equity, on Taiwan, as well as on legislation. And I do just want to flag the importance of the legislative items and the need to get to those first. Generally, it's the practice of the House's committees of the House to say that they need to prioritize legislation ahead of other matters. We have two pieces of legislation that have been referred to the Foreign Affairs Committee. Both are pieces of legislation that debate collapsed on after the first hour, and both are pieces of legislation that actually received unanimous consent of the House. So they clearly come with a strong consensus coming out of the House, and as this amendment says, we should study that legislation ahead of engaging in other business. So one piece of that of legislation is a private member's bill from MP John McKay on the government side. It is a bill that has broad all-party support, and it's designed to tackle the critical issue of supply chain slavery, of forced labor, child labor in supply chains. And it does so through a transparency framework requiring companies of a certain size to be transparent about what's in their supply chains. And I know that there's some perhaps folks on the committee even that want this bill to go further or to contain other measures. I think it's a sort of thing that does require a detailed study, and we have to work to make it as effective as possible at realizing the results that need to be there. Personally, I would be supportive of including in that bill kind of a targeted regional approach as well, to recognize that there are certain regions where there are high levels of forced labor coming out of. We have Mr. Ennis Cantor Freedom on Parliament Hill today, who's an NBA player, highlighting issues of the Uyghur genocide and as part of that forced labor issues. I think we should consider as part of that legislation or separate legislation something like the framework put in place with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act in the United States that would actually recognize the significant risk of forced labor in East Turkestan and say that any product coming out of there will be presumed to have forced labor in it unless there's proof otherwise. So that these are things we need to look at in the context of the committee study of Bill S-211. I've also said that I think we should have an amendment to that bill to add in an entities list, to add in provisions that would say the government should designate a list of entities that are potentially that we know there's a significant concern of forced labor, and providing that entities list will ease the work that government entities need to do, and also ease the work that the private sector needs to do in terms of just being able to identify what the sources of that forced labor are. Mr. Chair, I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Morantz in a moment here, and I know he hasn't spoken yet during the debate on this motion, and I will perhaps have more things to say later on in the debate. But before I give the floor to him, I just wanted to highlight the other piece of legislation that's before the committee now, and it's a bill that stands in my name, although it comes from the other place.
I just want to ensure that the chair is in charge. No one gives the floor to another member in a committee of the House of Commons. I believe you will give the floor to someone. I just want to make sure that we have young people in the room who may not know the rules of procedure, and anybody who could be misled, it would be a very dangerous thing. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you, Mr. Oliphant. Mr. Jennis, the floor is yours.
That's a point of order, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify, and I do agree with what...
Mr. Morantz, could you wait till you've been acknowledged? Mr. Morantz.
It's on that point of order, though. I just take exception to the use of the word misled. It's a good point of order that you recognize who has the floor, but to say that young people here may somehow be misled by my esteemed colleague here is inappropriate, and I'd encourage the member to withdraw his use of that word.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Zuberi.
I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm a younger person and I'm happy to learn, and so I'd also, if I can add something else, while I have been given the floor by you, thank you so much for that. I wanted to just ask again that all members focus their interventions in a way that is directly related to the issue at hand. So currently right now, I'm at a loss for exactly what the intervention is specifically about. And I'd ask that we stay focused and clear so that we can all follow this debate and conversation, which I believe has been happening for the last 16 hours, if I'm correct. 16 hours on this exact same point. So I'm sure that, we're all we should be at least, educated and people who are able to put forth something in a concise fashion. I'm assuming the same point can be boiled down from 16 hours to about 16 minutes. And I'm sure that we all have the ability to do that. We're supported by great staff who are behind us, who oftentimes support us in writing our words to make them pithy, to make them concise, and to have meaning. So I ask that all of us here work with our staff to have pithy and precise interventions so that they do not last on for 16 hours. I didn't get my staff to write that for me either.
Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. I think we can all agree, having heard several of you, that it is imperative that we have to maintain civility in this committee. And part of that civility, of course, is to ensure that we are adhering to process, that we are going about it in a rigorous fashion. So just to reiterate, when someone does wish to speak, they first have to be acknowledged by the chair. That is the first thing. And secondly, again, and this is a good reminder to all of us, that we should keep our comments relevant to the amendment at hand. Mr. Jennis, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm tempted to tease Mr. Zubari and say that wasn't a very concise intervention about being concise, but I appreciate his comments, and Mr. Oliphant will forgive me. I'm a relatively new member to this place in terms of how procedure works, and that I always need a refresher. So I appreciate him taking the time to ensure I'm fully up to speed, and I hope we'll get to hear from him about the risks of using Google Translate. By the way, I always find it edifying when he shares those. My intention in saying I will cede the floor to Mr. Morantz is, of course, not to imply that I have the power to give the floor to anyone, but it's more just based on what I thought was the speaking list, and the chair is nodding, so I assume that does mean that though I clearly failed in describing the procedures in the most formal way, that it is in fact Mr. Morantz next. So if I can just wrap up my comments for the moment by responding to Mr. Zubari's point with respect to the question of topicality in the amendment, and then making a couple comments about the piece of legislation that I was going to speak to. So the amendment we're debating is an amendment to the current motion, saying, and that this study, the words of the motion are, and that this study not take place until after the completion of the committee's studies on Ukraine, vaccine equity, and Taiwan, as well as on legislation sent from the House of Commons, and further that it not take place until the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure submits a report prescribing the manner in which the study is to proceed. So I think, in the context of this amendment, it would, of course, be fully appropriate to make arguments about the importance of the studies on Ukraine, the importance of the study on vaccine equity, the importance of the study on Taiwan, and the importance of the pieces of legislation, because that is precisely what this amendment says, which is that those three studies, as well as the legislation, should be given priority over the content of this motion. So very clearly, those five things: Ukraine, vaccine equity, Taiwan, S211, and S233. I think it's 233. Yeah, because there's another bill, S223, that has some folks very excited about it. So I think have to be careful not to mix those up. Anyways, so I think those are the topics that we're invited to discuss in the form of this amendment. So just the other piece of legislation, S233, is a bill. Is it 223? Yeah. Oh, it's 223. Okay, it's my bill, and I've forgotten the number. 223 is my bill. 233 is the controversial one. Yeah, sorry, it's not my bill. Again, we're being precise here on a Monday morning after I've taken a red eye, and that's good. So, anyways. Where was I here? The bill would make it a criminal offense for a person to go abroad and receive an organ taken without consent. This bill is designed to combat the horrific practice of forced organ harvesting and trafficking. It also contains a provision by which a person could be deemed inadmissible to Canada if they've been involved in forced organ harvesting and trafficking. We know that there's organ harvesting and trafficking, sadly, that happens in other countries, and there are limits, obviously, to what we can do about human rights violations that happen in other countries. But one important step we can take is ensuring that we, as Canada, that Canadians individually, are not complicit in those violations of human rights that that take place overseas. And one of the reasons we see forced organ harvesting and trafficking is demand for those organs. And if people are coming from other countries to receive an organ that was taken from someone without consent, that creates a demand for organs to be taken without consent, and that's where we have to. That's where we can try to intervene on the Canadian side and confront the issue of prospective demand. So I think these are two very important pieces of legislation, S223 and S211, and I'm hopeful that the committee will be able to get to them and proceed with them, as well as the other important items on the floor. So I did have a few other things I was going to say, but I will. Can I cede the floor? Is that I will finish my remarks for the moment, and I suspect next we'll hear from Mr. Morantz, and I'm looking forward to his intervention and the interventions of other members as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jennis. Mr. Morantz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And firstly, I want to congratulate you on becoming the chair of this committee, and I look forward to a collaborative relationship with you and with all parties on this very important committee. I just want to bring us all back for a moment to what it is we are actually debating currently. So as we know, MP Fry introduced a motion on May 6, 2022. In our last meeting, Mr. Jennis introduced an amendment to that motion, and his amendment simply says that, and this study not take place until after the completion of the committee studies on Ukraine, vaccine equity, and Taiwan, as well as studies on legislation sent from the House of Commons, and that further it not take place until the subcommittee on agenda and procedure submits a report prescribing the manner in which the study is to proceed, be inserted between the words rights globally and the words and that the committee reports its findings to the House. That is the subject that we are currently debating. And I must say, Mr. Chair, I'm surprised that this motion, this amendment, I should say, has not sailed through, because I recall in the meeting on Thursday, members around the table saying that's exactly what they wanted to see happen. Everybody wants to see us finish the study on Ukraine, on vaccine equity, on Taiwan. We have an obligation to study Bill S223 and S211. Everyone seems to agree on that. So I'm somewhat confounded by the fact that we can't seem to come to an agreement on an amendment that everybody has spoken in favor of, from what I can tell so far. And one of the things that's extremely important about this amendment is Ukraine. And I want to spend some time talking about my perspective. And I appreciate if some latitude on this, Mr. Chair, as I was not here the week that Dr. Fry's motion was introduced. And this is actually my very first time speaking on this subject. So having the committee finding itself in this unfortunate position, I just want to say I think that this committee is essentially, we are on the front lines, so we shouldn't underestimate our role. We're on the front lines of protecting Canada's foreign interests abroad. What we study here can directly impact on decisions that the government of Canada makes vis-a-vis our interests in Ukraine and around the world. Now, we know the world is a dangerous place, and it's even more dangerous now that Mr. Putin has taken the rash decision to invade our friend and ally Ukraine. Canada has over 1 million citizens of Ukrainian descent. Our ties to Ukraine carry a moral imperative. That imperative is to safeguard our foreign policy interests and to stand up for Ukrainian Canadians who are rightfully distraught over the carnage their beautiful, peace-loving, democratic state has been subjected to. It's also to stand up for the principles of peace and democracy throughout the world. That's why we're here, Mr. Chair. We have met these obligations. Canada has met these obligations over our long history. Prime Minister Lester Pearson stood up for these ideals when he assembled the first large-scale United Nations peacekeeping force to de-escalate the situation in Suez. The work he did, he was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for. Mr. Pearson also played an important role in his career to establish the peaceful, democratic state of Israel, resulting in our most important bilateral relationship in the Middle East. Prime Minister Brian Mulroney stood up for these ideals when he was alone on the world stage, seeking to free Nelson Mandela and bring an end to apartheid in South Africa. Mr. Mulroney spearheaded an aggressive Canadian push within the Commonwealth for sanctions to pressure South Africa to end apartheid and get Mr. Mandela released after 25 years of unjust incarceration. The day after his release from prison, Mr. Mandela spoke with Mr. Mulroney on the phone, and he said, "We regard you as one of our greatest friends because of the solid support we have received from you and Canada over the years," he told Mulroney, according to the Canadian Prime Minister's memoirs. "When I was in jail, having friends like you in Canada gave me more joy and support than I can say." In 2004, Mr. Mandela sent a letter in which he said Mr. Mulroney had provided strong and principled leadership in the struggle against apartheid. He also said that this was
Mr.
not
Chair,
a popular
I apologize,
position.
but I have a point of order on relevance.
Ms. Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the member opposite knows, I am a longtime friend of former Prime Minister Mr. Mulroney, and nothing pleases me more than hearing stories of their discussions, Mr. Mulroney and Mr. Mandela, but that is not relevant to the amendment before us.
Thank you, Ms. Bendayan. Yes, I would like to caution all the members to try to the best of their abilities to remain focused on the issue at hand. Ms. Morantz did ask for some latitude, but we would ask that you try to keep it relevant to the topic at hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sure you appreciate, as a lawyer, as I am, that it's important when you're formulating an argument to be able to set the stage for that argument, and that's what I'm doing with my comments about all former Prime Ministers, including Mr. Pearson, and, well, many former Prime Ministers, I should say, including Mr. Pearson. So if you would ask my colleagues to have a little bit of patience, and I'll continue with my argument if that's okay, and I'm sure that they will soon see the relevancy of why I am revisiting this important history of our country. So if I may, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Bendayan for your intervention through the chair. Thank you. In 2004, Mr. Mandela sent a letter in which he said Mulroney had provided strong and principled leadership in the struggle against apartheid. He also said this was not a popular position in all quarters, but South Africans today acknowledge the importance of this contribution to South Africa's eventual liberation and success. Prime Minister Jean Chrétien stood up for these ideals when he recognized that it would be wrong for Canada to get involved in the conflict in Iraq. And Prime Minister Harper stood up for these ideals when he committed Canada to the defense of Afghanistan. But now the NDP Liberal coalition seems to be saying, let's abandon our work on Mr. Putin's bloody invasion of Ukraine to study something else entirely. I'm not saying that other matters aren't important, Mr. Chair. But the most important foreign policy challenge of today in Ukraine, and I'm sure now my colleagues are starting to see the relevance of the comments that I made in the preamble, because I'm making a direct analogy to how those prime ministers behaved and how this committee is now behaving, presumably under the direction of the prime minister. So I'm not saying that other matters aren't important, Mr. Chair, not at all. I think there's merit in the motion that's been proposed by Dr. Fry, in fact. But the most important foreign policy challenge of today is Ukraine. It's Ukraine, Mr. Chair. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. That's what it is. This committee must be laser focused on pushing back on Mr. Putin's madness, plain and simple. The pushing back must include a concerted, sustained, and unrelenting focus on Ukraine by this committee. We cannot underestimate the importance of this committee in our machinery of government and how it influences our foreign policy. And to change the channel or try to change the channel in the middle of that, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but that's just wrong. Just plain wrong. It's just wrong. Well, let me ask you this, rhetorically. What would our NATO allies say about this committee changing its priorities away from Ukraine? More than that, what would Ambassador of Ukraine Kovalev say about this committee trying to change its priorities away from Ukraine? We all heard her. She just appeared before this committee. I think if we all asked her about Dr. Fry's motion, we know what she'd say. She just appeared before this committee pleading with us to do more. Not to study something else, but to do more about Ukraine. She described in detail the horrors Mr. Putin has inflicted on her beloved country. I recall at the end of her remarks, and I'm sure all of us here do as well, she spoke of a young mother who the Russians taped together with her living child and a mine that they detonated. This is what we should be studying, Mr. Chair, not something else. And frankly, it's upsetting. It's upsetting to me that we are even having this debate right now, because I thought all of my colleagues on this committee agreed. I heard what they said in the Thursday meeting. They want to study Ukraine. And Mr. Garnett's amendment to the motion says exactly that. We'll study Ukraine, and then we'll get to Dr. Fry's motion. So I'm not sure what the problem is here. But in any event, let me ask you this rhetorically. What would President Zelensky say about this committee changing its focus away from Ukraine, Mr. Chair? I think we know what he'd say. He appeared in Parliament begging for us to do more. Shame on this committee for trying to change the channel right now, Mr. Chair. Shame on this committee. We need to get back to studying Ukraine. I know my Liberal colleagues will argue that that's not the case. I heard Mr. Oliphant and Ms. Ben Dayan try and make the case, well, yeah, we want to study Ukraine. And that they continue to push a motion on another issue that's completely different. Putting a motion on, this is another thing I wanted to mention, Mr. Chair. Putting Dr. Fry's notice on motion, that's one thing. Motion on notice is one thing, but we do that all the time. There are many motions in the queue, and that's fine. But to move it, to actually activate it in the middle of the most important foreign policy work, the most important issue, the most important study this committee will likely ever do in this Parliament, and that many of us will do in our political careers, it's just wrong. It should be withdrawn, Mr. Chair, and we should get on with our work on Ukraine. At the very least, we should pass Mr. Jennis's amendment so that we know what the order of business of this committee will be. But that's not what the Liberal members of this committee want. Instead of continuing to study, they want to turn the page. They want to talk about what's going on in the United States. I'm not saying that this isn't an important issue, but Liberal members apparently don't understand that U.S. jurisprudence is not stare decisis in Canada. And in fact, there is no decision out of the U.S. Supreme Court. There's a leaked decision.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. There is no reference. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is no reference to the U.S. Supreme Court or to any thing related to the United States in this motion. Dr. Fry's motion, which was initially presented last year, I believe, in December, is...
Mr. Jennis, do you have a point of order?
Yes, sorry, I do have a point of order, just to say that this is not a matter of order what Ms. Ben Dayan is raising. She can get on the speaker's list, of course.
Mr. Chair, again, this is a point of order on relevance because the matter that the member opposite is discussing is not related to the amendment. And I would also point out that just today there was further news releases and media reports discussing the plight of Ukrainian women and their reproductive rights. And so I fail to see why it is that we cannot vote on the motion discussing the international state of reproductive rights for women.
Thank you, Ms. Ben Dayan. I understand that that was based on the issue of relevance. So again, let me remind all the members to attempt to the best of their abilities to keep their comments focused on the amendment at hand.
A further
yes,
point of order. Thank you.
Mr. Jennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would suggest maybe you make a ruling and provide some feedback to the government with respect to these repeated, I think, frankly, disruptive points of order on relevance, because I think they know, and as you've said previously, that there is a that the interpretation of relevance is generally fairly broad in this place, but frankly, my colleague has been speaking very precisely to the issue of Ukraine, which is directly in the amendment. Our amendment says we should finish the work on Ukraine before we get to the matter envisioned by the study proposed by Dr. Fry, and my colleague is speaking about the situation in Ukraine and making specific arguments along those lines. So it's just it's obvious that those comments are relevant. I mean, he's not talking about what he had for breakfast or something. So I wonder if you could maybe just provide some direction to the government so we don't have these sort of repeated interruptions because they're clearly not in any way in line with the history of the way these provisions around relevance have been interpreted. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, on the point
Thank
of
you.
order,
Yes, Ms. Bendayan.
simply to respond, my point of order on relevance was based on the invocation of the United States, which is not mentioned at all in the motion that Dr. Fry put forward, nor is it mentioned in the amendment that Mr. Genuis put forward, and therefore is not relevant to this debate. I think what my colleague is trying to do is to point out the numerous interruptions and seek some clarity from you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly open to hearing your views on relevance, but after 16 hours of filibustering, the Conservatives have lost the moral high ground to claim that we are interrupting them. We would like to get on to the business of this committee. We would like to get on to the studies that are before us. I certainly hope that the witnesses on the Taiwan study are not waiting in the wings, Mr. Chair, again for this fourth or fifth meeting that we are that we are being denied our witnesses on the Taiwan study. And certainly we have a lot of important work to get to on the matter of Ukraine. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you would like to rule on relevance more broadly, but I will continue to interrupt when this filibuster gets out of hand.
On the same point of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bendayan. Yes, Mr. Genis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think effectively the Parliament Secretary has just conceded the point insofar as she said that she's bringing up regular points of order to interrupt our interventions because she doesn't like aspects of the broader context. Very clearly, these points of order are not about relevance. They're about the fact that
Mr. Chair,
Liberal
can I make
members
a point
are.
Of order, please?
Yeah, after I don't mind after I'm done up to the chair, but I'll finish my point of order. But maybe in response to Ms. Bendayan, I wonder if there'd be since there maybe is a new appetite to adjourn debate, I'd be happy to seek unanimous consent to adjourn debate on this motion. I can't move a motion because I don't have the floor, but is there unanimous consent to do that? I can seek unanimous consent, though, on a point of order. All right. Well,
Not on a point of order. You know that.
you could. That's how you see is sought in the House all the time. Anyways, it sounds like there isn't unanimous consent to adjourn debate, but we would be happy to adjourn debate on this at any time for the record. But I apologize that maybe isn't a point of order, but the previous part was. So thank you.
I'll go to Ms. McPherson on a point of order before allowing Mr. Morantz to once again resume
Thank you, Mr.
debate.
Chair. Thanks
Ms.
for recognizing me.
McPherson.
I just want to make it. I just want to make a point that Mr. Genuis is claiming that he can determine what is the point of order and what is not, and that is actually the right of view, of course, Mr. Chair. So I just would like to remind this committee that it is in fact the chair that determines whether something is a point of order.
Point of order. Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Yes, Mr. Perkins.
I think the chair probably knows what a point of order is and doesn't need to be told by Ms. McPherson what it is, so I don't think that was actually a point of order. It was trying to give instruction to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Again, we have been listening to Mr. Morantz earlier talk about moral leadership. So let me take that as the point of departure here. Let me ask every member here to remain relevant to the issue at hand. I think at times like this, it's important that it behooves us to consider what our responsibilities are here and to attempt to the best of our abilities to remain focused on the issue at hand. So, Mr. Morantz, the floor once again is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your Solomon-esque wisdom when it comes to these types of matters. And I apologize if I misinterpreted the motion to mean the United States when I read the words given recent reports of international backsliding related to women's sexual and reproductive health and rights. I presume that that was not referring to the leak of the decision in the United States, and that based on the comments that have been made, that won't be a topic of debate when the motion actually comes up. So that's very, very reassuring, Mr. Chair. Now, back to my main point, though. This is not the time to let up the pressure on Mr. Putin. It's not the time to take our foot off the gas, and it's not the time to let down Ambassador Kovalev, President Zelensky, Ukrainian Canadians, or our allies. It's not the time, Mr. Chair. This is not the time to abandon principle for political attacks. Now, I want to remind my colleagues about some of the things that they have said on the record about Ukraine, because I'm hoping that they still mean what they said. So, for example, on March 2nd, the member from Milton said, and I quote, "Canada is home to the largest Ukrainian diaspora outside of the region. Ukrainian Canadians helped build this country that we all love and call home, and Canada stands with Ukraine militarily, financially, diplomatically, and from a humanitarian perspective. We will continue," he said, "we will continue to heed the call and support Ukraine's right to thrive as a peace-loving and independent sovereign nation. The Russian attack is not only an attack on Ukraine, it's a grave threat to global peace, democracy, and all that ensures our collective safety and security. The world is witnessing some of the bravest and most heart-wrenching acts of Ukrainian patriotism, from regular citizens to President Zelensky fighting for their lives and their nation. They're not only fighting for their lives and their nation, they are not only fighting for Ukraine, they fight for all of us." Very profound words from the member from Milton. On March 25th, the member from Willowdale said, "At times like this, we must all resolve to ensure that our country continues to prove steadfast in supporting the government of Ukraine, and that we do all we can to assist individual Ukrainians in their hour of need. Let it never be said that our country shirked. Let it never be said that our country shirked from our responsibilities." He also said on May 13th, "Proud Canadians will never relent, and neither should we in our assistance." Well, I agree with the members' comments 100%, Mr. Chair. On March 28th, the Minister of Defense said Canada is not alone in this mission to help Ukraine. NATO allies are more united than ever. The world has come to a dangerous place, and while these dangers feel far away to Canadians, these are tumultuous times. We must unite as a country and redouble our efforts to support our allies. We stand with the people of Ukraine. We will continue to support them in the face of an unwarranted Russian aggression. The member for Ottawa West Nepean and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Development said on March 21st, "Canada's commitment to stand united with those affected by the conflict in Ukraine is clear. We are continuing to work in close collaboration with our allies and our humanitarian partners on the ground to monitor the development of this rapidly evolving crisis." I must admit, Mr. Chair, this quote left me confounded and wondering how the Parliamentary Secretary can keep that commitment without being timely informed by this committee. On January 31st, the member for Outremont, who is a member of this committee, said, "I think that it is very important for us to have this meeting today as the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. We are at a turning point, a crucial moment for rules-based order. Quite frankly, it is possible that we are on the eve of a new invasion of Ukraine by Russia, a military confrontation that could have vast and devastating consequences, not only for Ukraine, but also for Europe and NATO, including Canada. I think that it is important for this committee to study the issue and make it a priority." Make it a priority, she said. Also on January 1st, the member for Surrey Centre said, and I think he said, I think the most pressing issue internationally for foreign affairs is the situation in Ukraine. The most pressing issue internationally for foreign affairs, he said, Mr. Chair, is the situation in Ukraine, and I think we must treat it as being of paramount importance, and deal with it as quickly and efficiently as possible. I think this should be the first study that this committee deals with in this Parliament. I could go on and on quoting Liberal members on this issue, Mr. Chair. I wonder, though, in the recent context of this attempt to limit the study in favor of another, if they still feel this way. When we first started talking about this issue on January 31st, there were roughly 100,000 Russian troops on Ukraine's borders. 3 weeks later, on February 24th, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Thankfully, it appears they have failed in their attempt to unseat President Zelensky, but the risk is still very high, and we must keep up the pressure. We must plan for more deeper and harsher sanctions. We must plan for more financial and military aid. We simply can't do this if we take our eyes off the ball. We can't be studying something else. Russia has violated international law, including the Charter of the United Nations. We don't know what Mr. Putin might do next. Article 5 of NATO could force us into a broader European conflict that we need to be discussing. In fact, I just had a meeting with Latvia's ambassador to Canada, Mr. Kaspars Ozolins, during his visit to Winnipeg last week. He was there to wish 500 of our troops well and to thank them before their deployment, 6-month deployment to Latvia as part of NATO's Operation Reassurance. He told me he grew up during the Cold War and he worries about what might become of his country if Russia were to invade. These issues are unfolding in real time, is my point, Mr. Chair. This committee must stay focused. Ambassador Kovalev told us of Ukrainian children having been forcibly taken deep into Russian territory. I remember she told us to not rest until they are returned home. We should be helping her. She also told us of Russian soldiers committing sexual violence against women and children. Now, Mr. Chair, I recently returned from a trip to Berlin where I was paired with the Minister of International Development. While I was there, I had the opportunity to visit the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, where some of the worst atrocities of the Holocaust were perpetrated. I couldn't help but think about the refrain of "never again" as I walked through the gates that said, molded in iron in the bars of the gates, "Arbeit macht frei," work makes you free. We cannot allow this to go on in this century. The stakes are simply too high. I was honored to lay a wreath alongside the minister at the Monument for Murdered Jews of Europe and tour its Holocaust Museum. While I was there, I also had the opportunity to meet with 3 members of the Bundestag. One of them was my counterpart, the vice chair of this committee in Germany. You know what their top priority is, Mr. Chair? I'll tell you. Their top priority is they're concerned about Russian brutality. They're concerned about helping the 600,000 refugees that have come to their country, and they're concerned about energy security. I think if I told them about this motion to study something completely different, they wouldn't understand. We need to be studying and talking about Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morantz. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. The floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai écouté avec...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Now, I listened very carefully to the comments made by our colleague. And, Mr. Chair, I couldn't but be surprised by the crocodile tears that I'm seeing from our Conservative colleagues regarding the fact that we would be preventing things from moving forward where it comes to our study on Ukraine. And I'd like to point out, Mr. Chair, that in order to get out of this filibuster, a motion was introduced in the House to enable committees to travel, namely to Ukraine, and the Conservatives who didn't want to put an end to the filibuster and who want to prevent everything from moving forward until the amendment has been withdrawn on the reproductive health of women. Well, they indicated they would be opposing any motions, including the one in the House, which would enable this committee to travel to Ukraine, to go to Poland, to meet with refugees, and to see how the Polish people are welcoming Ukrainians to go to Sweden and Finland, to show support for our allies who want to join NATO, to go to Belgium, to meet with NATO officials. So to say today that, well, we can't discuss these issues on Ukraine, when, in fact, they're the ones who are preventing this committee from finalizing details on a trip that would be so well received by our Ukrainian colleagues, and it's something that came to us, a request that came to us from the former ambassador to Ukraine. It was a request for Canadians to travel to Ukraine, and the Conservatives are the ones who are preventing that from moving forward. So I have to say that I was shocked to hear our Conservative friends cry these crocodile tears a few moments ago, attempting to mislead people about the fact that we don't want to, or indicating we don't want to continue our study on Ukraine, when in fact they're the ones who are throwing a monkey wrench into the planning. Now, no one will believe, Mr. Speaker, that with this motion from Ms. Fry, that this study is designed to take place and to take over or replace all of those other studies. No, Ms. Fry's motion is a motion that was put on notice, up for debate. And I expressed my reservations because I said it's not the way that this committee proceeds. Normally, this committee just determines its future business at the subcommittee, and then the full committee decides on it. So I was surprised by this very different way of proceeding, because Ms. Fry kept insisting that she wanted the committee to focus on these matters. For months, she's been talking about the importance of the committee to look into women's reproductive health, and never had an opportunity to do so. But unless I'm mistaken, nobody is claiming that the study must take precedence over the ones that are underway at present. And this is where the filibuster by the Conservatives is preventing us from talking about Taiwan, Ukraine, vaccine equity, and to talk about bills, the ones that Mr. Jennis wants to bring forward. So there's something fundamentally bothersome. Well, I can't even find the right word to express it. To delicately express what I'm actually thinking about this. But at any rate, it's bothersome to see what the Conservatives are doing with this filibuster by claiming that, in fact, we all want to talk about something different other than Ukraine. I also was quite bothered by the fact that my colleague, Mr. Morantz, is putting words in the mouth of the new ambassador from Ukraine to Canada. I believe that the ambassador can fully understand that we're not talking about suspending a study on Ukraine, although the Conservatives have already suspended it for several sessions now, several meetings, but that what we're talking about is having the committee look at reproductive health. And I'm convinced, without myself wanting to impute motives or put words in the mouths of anyone, including the ambassador from Ukraine to Canada, that she would find it relevant for our committee to focus on that issue, which in fact is affecting more than 51, or that can affect more than 51% of the global population. So I think that it is a subject that does warrant our attention. Now, I'd like to come back to the amendment being put forth by Mr. Jennis, which calls for us to put an end to the filibuster And we go back to the study of the various subjects that the committee's focused on, as well as the legislation. I've already expressed my reservations with respect to the second part of the motion as it is worded, because it refers to the study. And the study that we're referring to is the same study that at the start of the motion we say this study. So we're talking about at the start of the motion, we're talking about the reproductive health rights motion. And then where we talk about the work plan for the weeks to come, we'll have a study on the other issues. So as I said previously, I had concerns with respect to that segment of the amendment. And Mr. Oliphant made a comment that struck me, because he said, well, at the start, he said with respect to Taiwan, at the request of the Conservatives, and I won't go back to the speech that I made in the House about all of that, where I said how curious or odd it was that the Conservatives are interested in these relations, Sino-Canadian relations, because the studies are on the verge of wrapping up. But because we decided to reconstitute the Canada-China committee, would it not be relevant to enable the committee to focus on the issue of Taiwan, even if that means passing on to them the work that we've already done? Now, we could perhaps decide to continue and finalize our study, but in short, first and foremost, we need to just determine what we're going to do with respect to Taiwan. So if I may, Mr. Chair, I would like to move a sub-amendment. I've already sent it to the clerk, and it says that the words be replaced by the following: that the committee make a decision on the studies before it, and that the words "the study must be conducted" be replaced with the words "studies must be undertaken." Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bergeron. We now go to...
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't fully follow the amendment, but Mr. Bergeron suggested he'd send it to the clerk. Can that be distributed? Is that ready for distribution, or?
We're still actually waiting for translation.
Okay. I assume that will be distributed when the translation is in, but if it's acceptable, could Mr. Bergeron just repeat the amendment again so we're clear what we're debating? Thanks.
Mr. Bergeron, we can't hear you.
Les joies du virtuel.
I apologize. This is the virtual environment. So here's my motion again, that the words completing the words of the committee be replaced with the words that the committee make a decision on the studies underway, and that the study must be undertaken be replaced with shall be undertaken.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time following that. Pause.
Mr. Bergeron, can I ask you to repeat that one more time, please?
Avec grand plaisir, Monsieur le Président.
With pleasure, Mr. Chairman. Repetition is a good pedagogical tool, so we'll try it again. That we replace the words that the committee undertake the studies, and that the word studies must be completed by studies in the plural must be completed. Now, if I may, I could offer a bit of clarification by way of an explanation. The first part that I want to change in the first part of the motion is designed to have us make a decision on the studies, committee studies, Ukraine, vaccine equity, and Taiwan. So we make a decision on those studies. Now, that can mean that we complete those studies or that we make a different decision regarding Taiwan, for example. And with respect to the second part of the amendment, the idea is simply to put in the word studies in the fourth line. Study is to proceed, and make it studies is to proceed. I hope that's helped Mr. Jennis.
So if we could just ask the clerk to provide us with an unofficial translation until we wait for the official translation to come in, I think that would help all members. Yes, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just give me 1 second here. I think I've got it so that it could at least be understood by all members. What I'll do is I will read the amendment as it would read if it were sub-amendment, like if the sub-amendment were to just replace those words so that it makes more sense. Perfect. So what I have is, and that this study not take place until the committee makes a decision on the studies before it of Ukraine, vaccine equity, and Taiwan, as well as studies on legislation sent from the House of Commons, and further, that it not take place until the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure the report specifying the manner in which the studies be undertaken. That's unofficially what I have.
And how much longer, approximately, before we get the official translation?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't have a time frame on that.
Okay. So is it the wish of the members to actually debate this sub-amendment? Yes. Did you want to speak to the sub-amendment?
I just want to say it's still very unclear. I mean, the reference to this study is very unclear. I would rather wait and see the whole proposal or motion written in front of us, so at least to know how to decide on it, if that's okay.
So is it the wish of the committee to adjourn for maybe 5 minutes? Suspend for 10 minutes, my apologies.
Until we get the, yes.
Okay, we'll suspend for 5 minutes. Members, the clerk has done the translation that she shared with us. She has gone back to the member who moved this sub-amendment, and the member has approved her English translation of the French sub-amendment. The clerk has kindly emailed it to all of our emails for your ease of reference. However, for those who may not have access to their emails, I will be reading it out. The sub-amendment reads as follows: that the words "and that this study not take place until the committee makes a decision on the studies before it on Ukraine, vaccine equity in Taiwan, as well as studies on legislation sent from the House of Commons, and further, that it not take place until the Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure submits a report specifying the manner in which the studies be undertaken, be inserted between the words, quote, rights globally, end of quote, and the words, and that the committee report its findings to the House. So that is the official English translation of the sub-amendment introduced by Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Oliphant.
Two things. I'd like to get on the speaker's list. I don't know how you're handling that. But just on a point of order, and I didn't really think about this before, but because I'm now studying the amendment more closely, could I get a sense from the chair on the appropriate nature of a negative motion? Because there is precedent that motions that tell you something you can't do have not been allowed. And I just want maybe the clerk could advise on the appropriateness of, and it may be okay in a sub-amendment or an amendment, but to ask a committee not to do something, I think may be problematic. And I hadn't really noticed it until I had the help of Mr. Bergeron's amendment, me really looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliphant. I will consult with the clerk. So I've had an opportunity to check with the clerk. That is an interesting issue you have raised, Mr. Oliphant. My understanding is that you are correct. You cannot have a negative wording which will essentially have the same purpose as the amendment if it gets you to the same place and all you have done is made it negative. However, in this case, that does not seem, this particular rule does not seem to apply, and these are simply Mr. Bergeron's instructions. So although the principle is valid, it does not apply to the sub-amendment before us. Now, we will now, if the members would like to discuss this sub-amendment, please do let me know. Mr. Jennis.
So is there a new speaking list, or are we going to the...
Well, and now we're talking about the focus now is on the sub-amendment,
okay.
Unless members do not like to debate it.
Okay, so we've got a new speakers list, so members who wish to speak to the sub-amendment. Okay. All right, well...
Mr. Oliphant is on that list.
Okay, I will just very, very briefly say that it's view that the language around completion of the committee studies are important, and I don't know if one can sub. I mean, I'm happy to discuss it, and I'm not wedded to the particular language of the original amendment, but our view is that the completion of the studies on Ukraine, vaccine equity, and Taiwan is important, and insofar as this sub-amendment removes the requirement that work be completed. Now, I understand Mr. Bergeron's points with respect to Taiwan, and maybe there's a case for a sub-amendment that carves out the Taiwan piece in some particular way, but insofar as the revised amendment now says that other work would not have to be completed prior to proceeding to this study, that's not consistent with our position. So I'll leave my comments there for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jennis. We now go to Mr. Oliphant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will just very briefly say that I will be supporting this sub-amendment, or this amendment to the amendment. That's where we're at, I think. It's a sub-amendment. And I believe our side will. We find it helpful because it doesn't tie the hands of the committee. It allows the committee to continue making decisions as we go. And it gives us some flexibility as opposed to being kind of a fundamentalist position. So we like the openness of it. We want to thank Mr. Bergeron for a helpful suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliphant. We now go to Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Jennett said, well, why we'll be opposing it. Perhaps I could give a little background, since it's my first time in this committee, about my background. I'd like to comment on Mr. Zuberi's earlier comment. I am young too in terms of being an MP. But perhaps not as young as you in age, Mr. Zuberi, but and I have some familiarity with Mr. Oliphant's riding, having been a constituent of Don Valley West for 10 years in Leaside. But more importantly, I served in the Mulroney government as a member of the political staff for the Honourable Barbara McDougall through 4 different government departments, including the Department of Foreign Affairs. I was there a senior policy advisor and executive assistant while she served in that role for 3 years, from 1991 to 1993. It was a very interesting time in the world, obviously with the collapse of the Soviet Union, with the coup in Haiti, negotiating NAFTA, unrest and a coup in Peru, the departure of Pinochet in Chile, Nelson Mandela has been mentioned earlier, and obviously Tiananmen Square. And with regard to the collapse of the Soviet Union, this is where it ties to Ukraine and the study on Ukraine quite specifically. Canada, as we all know, was the first country to recognize Ukraine as an independent country from the Soviet Union. While I served in my role for Mrs. McDougall in the then named Secretary of State for External Affairs, as the position was called, I can remember, I don't know how many here remember what they were doing on December 1st, 1991. Some might not have even been born that are in the room, but I recall where I was. I was sitting at my then girlfriend's parents' house in Hawkesbury, Ontario, as we were having a discussion about whether or not to recognize Ukraine, back on those old big Motorola cell phones that we had back then, because the Soviet Union formally didn't collapse till between Christmas and New Year's of that year. And it was important to us, with our long-standing relationship with Ukraine and with the number of Ukrainian Canadians that are very active in Canada, over 1 million back then and still now, that we recognize Ukraine first and recognize it before the Soviet Union collapsed. Now, this was a difficult decision. It was not something the department was keen on at the time, because the Soviet Union still existed, and recognizing a country within the Soviet Union while it still existed was not the diplomatic thing to do. And because Prime Minister Mulroney, as these jobs are when you lead a country, had very close relationships with President Gorbachev. So being the first to acknowledge that a major part of the Soviet Union was no longer part of that was not something that Mr. Gorbachev wanted to see his friend Prime Minister Mulroney doing. And, you know, we used to take correspondence home for ministers and, you know, the many letters ministers get in the big bags, and I was sitting there doing that, and I got the call from Privy Council office saying, we want to try and work on this. So I spent the better part of December 1st and December 2nd, 1991, negotiating back and forth just how and why and what we would say on the recognition of Ukraine. And I say that because at that time, we were dealing with a lot of issues around the world that were important too. We were in the middle of negotiating NAFTA with Mexico and the United States. We had just come back. I had just come back with the minister. We had had a military coup in Haiti against the democratically elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, first democratically elected president of Haiti, where we had passed a resolution through the Organization of American States, led by my boss's speech there, to impose Western Hemispheric sanctions on the illegal coup in Haiti. And I can remember, because we wrote it on the plane
Chair,
going
point
down.
of order on relevance.
The relevance. Okay.
That's it? Did you have any?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to expand further, but I think you see the reason for my intervention. We have happily listened to the resume of the new member for the Conservative Party, but now we are veering off into discussions of Haiti. It is not relevant to the sub-amendment, and it's not relevant to the amendment, and I would remind us all that we are dealing with a motion on the reproductive rights of women. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bendayan. Yes, if I could just implore all the members to actually try to keep their interventions focused on the sub-amendment before us.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair, and I haven't even begun to talk about all the things in my resume. If you want to hear that, it just barely scratched the surface. But the relevance with regard to Haiti is economic sanctions and the way you deal with regimes that have gone rogue in the world.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think the comments are very. We also have bells.
Yes, we do have bells. So if we have a unanimous consent. Okay, so the meeting will be suspended until the next scheduled meeting of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you.